My guest today is Eli Marcus. We're going to talk about how to embark on a lifelong journey of learning. How can it impact your life and help you change yourself and grow your business? And how to leverage digital stages in order to build relationships, grow your authority, and grow your business. Brilliant.
Well, I'm going to take you back to when I was a kid growing up in this place called Queens, New York City. And what I learned the hard way is to allow yourself to be vulnerable. For a long time, I was kidding myself and kidding the world. I had this persona, and I wasn't really letting people in and see the true world that I had. So nobody knew that there was some dysfunction. Nobody knew that I had what I consider the greatest handicap of all. You know what that handicap was, Isar?
No.
Painful shyness. Believe it or not, I was the kid in the back of the room, and a lot of people may be able to relate to this, and he didn't want the teacher to call on him. And if the teacher called on him, it was worse than death. I started to read every self-help book I possibly could. And I found that it's all in the mindset. It wasn't this thing that you're born with. You're not born shy. You create the shyness, the environment around you, the people around you knock you down. How many of us, when we were kids, are told, hey, stupid, don't do this. Hey, dummy. So I finally found out that I didn't have to run my life with this label of this shy kid. I found there was this extroverted side to me. So I'm the extroverted introvert. And I think most human beings fall within that extroverted introvert. Some people just never realized that extroverted side. And so they never challenged themselves enough to find out that they actually have it. So that's the key right there, is to put yourself in uncomfortable positions to find out what you're really made of. Because if you don't put yourself in scary, uncomfortable, fearful situations, you will never know what you're really made of. And boy, have I put myself in uncomfortable situations. And at the moment, it seemed like the end of the world. Back to when I was a kid growing up in this place called Queens, New York City. And what I learned the hard way is to allow yourself to be vulnerable. For a long time, I was kidding myself and kidding the world. I had this persona, and I wasn't really letting people in and see the true world that I had. So nobody knew that there was some dysfunction. Nobody knew that I had what I consider the greatest handicap of all. You know what that handicap was, Isar?
No.
Painful shyness. Believe it or not, I was the kid in the back of the room, and a lot of people may be able to relate to this, and he didn't want the teacher to call on him. And if the teacher called on him, it was worse than death. I started to read every self-help book I possibly could. And I found that it's all in the mindset. It wasn't this thing that you're born with. You're not born shy. You create the shyness, the environment around you, the people around you knock you down. How many of us, when we were kids, are told, hey, stupid, don't do this. Hey, dummy. So I finally found out that I didn't have to run my life with this label of this shy kid. I found there was this extroverted side to me. So I'm the extroverted introvert. And I think most human beings fall within that extroverted introvert. Some people just never realized that extroverted side. And so they never challenged themselves enough to find out that they actually have it. So that's the key right there, is to put yourself in uncomfortable positions to find out what you're really made of. Because if you don't put yourself in scary, uncomfortable, fearful situations, you will never know what you're really made of. And boy, have I put myself in uncomfortable situations. And at the moment, it seemed like the end of the world. Find out what the people who had all the marbles, what they were doing. Learn from those people, observe them. Observe how they interviewed when you were on a talk show. Observe the guests that were on those talk shows, how they sort of came to life. A lot of those people behind the scenes are shy, but when they get on the talk show, they spring to life. And then I realized the Michael Jacksons and the Barbara Streisands and the Johnny Carsons, they seem like the world's greatest entertainers, and they were. But when they got off the stage, they were a whole other persona. So what does that mean? That means when you're in your zone, when you're doing exactly what you love, exactly what makes you breathe, exactly what floats your boat, you can pull this side out of you you never knew existed, this extroverted side, this guy that's excitable when you're doing what you love. And so that's what I was doing, getting more into what I was interested in. I wanted a better world for myself. And it took a very long time for me. And it was repetition. So I have people tell me, Eli, I've listened to this motivation stuff. It doesn't work. I said, well, let me ask you a question. Do you take vitamins once every 6 months? Do you eat once every 6 months? Do you think you're going to go to course one time and it's going to last for a lifetime? It doesn't work that way. It wears off. You have to have it daily. You have to be inspired all the time. You have to find something that gets you, whether it's a podcast, whether, you're going to your local synagogue or your local mosque or your local church. You got to constantly be inspired by those that make a difference for you. So for me, it was the motivational speakers. There's two ways that I run my world. And one is to be my authentic self, Isar. And the second one is to model, because my authentic self is going to get me only so far. And by modeling the best of what other people have to offer, add that into my authentic self, now I become unstoppable.
Yes.
You really think about it. You
Yes.
can only be your authentic self, but you can add the elements of 1,000 other people, the best of each.
I love this. So podcasting is great and what you do is amazing. How do you make a living?
I still make my living on my day job. So the podcasting part is something that I'm doing as my passion, as my hobby. At some point, I may give up my day job and do this step by step. See, that's the thing. So many people are afraid to get out of their comfort zone. So many people are what they considered stuck. I'm stuck. I've got 2 kids at home. I got a wife. I got bills to pay. I live week to week. I can't make that leap of faith. So start part-time, do it as a hobby first. Let it grow. Prove to yourself that it's something that can be done. Otherwise, you're going to be that 80-something-year-old guy looking back on your life and wondering, what if? That is probably the biggest disease on the planet. What if? Because Isar, most of the dreams in this life end up, unfortunately, in the graveyard. And so we don't want that to happen to any of us. So you got to follow your dream at some point, even if it's part-time. And so now you want to hear my Mayor of Times Square story?
For sure.
So a Broadway producer who's pretty prolific out there producing some major shows said to me, Eli, you're all over the streets of New York City. Everywhere I go, I bump into you in the street. You're like everywhere. There's like 2 of you. You know something? You're the mayor of Times Square. And I'm like, okay. Now, I'm not that heady or full of myself to say I'm the mayor of Times Square. But, that started to catch on. People started to hear that. They started calling me the mayor of Times Square, teasing me and having, good fun with the ribbing. And so then one guy who's a graphic artist caught wind of it, creates this background that you see here, this virtual background that says mayor of Times Square. And I'm like, okay, do I actually have the guts to actually turn it on, the virtual background, while I'm in one of these 100-person Zoom calls? And I did. So what I learned is that, something? Stephanie Germanotta was not born Lady Gaga. She was born Stephanie Germanotta.
True.
And so therefore, George Burns was not born George Burns. He had another name. Rock Hudson was not born Rock Hudson. And so they created these names, these personas, and something? Personas work. It gets attention, but the persona that you have has to be something that's true to what you've actually achieved or earned, or what you're about. I mean, Lady Gaga's a superstar. She's great. She deserves that,
Yes.
name. And so I have been working with more businesses in Times Square than probably any other human being in history. So In that sense, yeah, I am the unofficial mayor of Times Square.
Definitely lasted more than all of them as the mayor. I want to add something to what you said because it's so important. It's like the small addition you added in the end. Today in the digital world, so many people create fake personas for themselves. You know, they pay $600 for a Ferrari for a day. They pay another $1,000 for a mansion. They shoot like 1,000 videos in that one day. And now they make it look as if they're like the most successful person ever and they're going to try to sell you a course. And I think it's unethical and I think it's totally unfair. And I think people will see through that in 5 minutes once they go into their content. And I'll say more than that. I think, and I said it before I pay somebody for a course, I consume their free content for 3 months, 6 months, a year and a half, until I'm convinced that there's real value in that person that can give me something. And it goes back exactly to what you said. You said it has to be an extension of the real you.
You know, it's funny. People think what I'm saying is cliched when I say I can change your entire life, right? It's not, well, everybody says that. I not only can do that, but I can prove that I can do that because I've got people that I interview who have the answers to the questions that I want for myself. So for instance, I interviewed a world-renowned cardiologist. I interviewed him 3 years ago. I finally re-listened to the tape 2 months ago. I missed one of the things he said because, you know, sometimes you're not listening the first time. Like we said, reread the book, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you're ready for it now. And what he said was so profound, so easy, a 10-minute process that can help me potentially not get heart disease, which is the #1 killer. Because unfortunately, people only think about those things when it's too late. And when the heart attack happens and you're dead, it's a little late to reverse that.
Just a little
late.
a smidge late.
Yeah. So in my podcast, he reveals the 6 foods that you need to take every day that'll give you anti-inflammatory, antioxidant properties to fight not only heart disease, but likely almost any other disease on the planet. Of course, there are certain hereditary diseases. It doesn't probably matter almost what you do, you're going to get it. That's just the way it is. But then there are other things that are very preventable. And so I bring people like that. I bring other people who can show you how to be the #1, a top-selling book author. Why? Because I interviewed the #1 best-selling book author in nonfiction in history, who wrote this little book series called Chicken Soup for the Soul. So who best to learn from? Yeah. So that's what I mean. Somebody wants to write a book, sure, they can go ahead and spend $1,000 on a course, or just listen to my podcast, start that way for free, or listen to Isar's podcast and the value that you bring for that area.